I don't remember if you guys actually suggested this or not. If you did, I'm sorry, I forgot who it was. But I thought this was kind of interesting. What would happen if a fully loaded A-10 Warthog traveled to Germany during World War II?
I put something in Discord IRL pictures if you want to look at it.
Later, DC. Yeah. So this should be it's this thing. It's done by Infographics Show. So yeah, this is a hypothetical I'm really curious about. Like, what would happen if you and King, that's what I'm wondering. That's what I'm curious about if it's going to touch on this. So let's see.
Inside, German officers huddled around a table covered with maps, debating troop movements, supply depots, and the best positioning of artillery batteries. They felt safe here, shielded by miles of anti-aircraft defenses and the thick canopy above. But as they eagerly pored over the plans to blunt the impending Allied invasion, hellfire from the blue was about to shatter their illusion of security. It began with a barely audible hum, swelling rapidly into an unholy growl which seemed to shake the very roots of the dense forest floor. Before anyone could react, a blinding flash engulfed the tent. The fiery blast ripped through the canvas, maps and the bodies alike, spraying pink mist into every direction. A thunderous, monotone growl followed the murderous cacophony as it faded into oblivion. Paralyzed and panicking guards stared at where their command tent once stood. Its smoldering debris now filled the air with...
Okay, all of this damage sounds like at least one missile strike. Because, I'm sorry, like, I love the cannon on the A-10. The A-10 would not cause shit to erupt into flames. It would obliterate everything. It would not cause everything to erupt into flames like this. But it's very similar to, like, weird world history. Yeah, exactly. It's not considered, like, I'd say, like, maybe, okay, like, a single Hellfire missile being fired because what? Warthogs carry a couple racks of those. So, that's, exactly, Zero. That's what I'm saying, like, there's gotta have been a missile strike in here.
With the acrid smell of burned fuel and flesh, the Nazis didn't know what hit them. Peeling up into the clouds above them was an A-10 Thunderbolt, one of the world's deadliest ground attack aircraft. Only this one had somehow been sent back in time to raise hell over the skies of Europe.
True, Andrea.
A fully loaded A-10 have made the difference for Allied forces at the height of World War II. Join us on today's episode of the Infographics Show to find out. Dawn's early light glinted off the dark rolling waves of the English Channel as a squadron of Republic P-47 Thunderbolts approached the cagey ground.
Thank you for the prime zip ties.
Workhorse of the Allied Air Forces cruised low over the water, their bulbous 18-cylinder radial engines rumbling. The pilots, veterans of countless sorties, climbed high into the air as they approached the French coastline ahead, scanning the skies for signs of enemy activity. Something off to the right, 3 o'clock high. The flight lead crackled into his throat mic. In perfect unison, each of the pilots flying in the V glanced up over their right shoulders, straightening to make sense of the gray shape coming into view.
Can you imagine being a pilot in the World War II era, flying a sortie mission? You look over and there's a fucking A-10 Warthog just cruising like, what's up? These guys will be pissing their jorts if they saw this.
They could make out 2 shimmering orbs in the pre-dawn darkness. It was an aircraft, that much was certain. Yet, it was one that looked much more like a spaceship than anything they'd ever seen back in England. The rearward jet engines almost whispered compared to the P-47's roaring radials. "Hold your fire," the flight lead said, looking over the snub-nosed behemoth. Its wings were absurdly short and straight, swept back ever so slightly, carrying an impressive array of pods.
Whoa. I'm sorry, but in comparison to the P-38, an A-10's wings would not look absurdly short. An A-10's wings would look pretty fucking big by comparison. And yeah, Alex, I mean, this A-10 is probably like barely staying airborne as slow as it is to try and match pace with these 38s.
And bombs. It had a glass orb canopy not unlike their P-47s, and a massive frontal cannon that looked like a Civil War-era Gatling
They were-
gun
they're
on
short,
steroids.
Yeah,
I think
Raven,
he's
by
one
our
bars, the
comparisons,
flight lead
yes.
said warily. As he climbed upwards, leveling out next to
Good
the
night,
mysterious
Silver.
airframe, it bobbed its wings back, a welcome sign. Amazingly, as it did so, the flight lead made out the same unmistakable black and white invasion stripes as those on his own wings. Inside the strange cockpit, staring dumbfounded back at the squadron of P-47s, sat Captain Ray Dusty Mason. Just minutes before, he had been in Colorado
Well,
flying
it
a
had-
routine training exercise until
I mean, Alex, it would have to. An A-10 has to have a low stall speed because of the cannon. Because then, when you fire that, when the A-10 fires its cannon, the recoil on it is so extreme, it literally slows the A-10 down because the recoil's pushing it backwards. And that's why they teach them to do controlled bursts, because if the A-10 cannon fires too long, the aircraft will stall and fall out of the sky due to lack of lift because the recoil is pushing it backwards so strongly. So, yeah, it makes sense that the A-10 would be designed to handle lower speed stall prevention.
suddenly he wasn't. He couldn't explain it. One moment he'd been flying over a Colorado 14er, and the next he was buzzing over a huge body of water, a flotilla of sleek olive green P-47s off his A-10's left wing. Dusty wondered if he was in a simulation. The approaching coastline looked like the coastline of France that he'd seen so often during his days as a commercial pilot, before joining the U.S. Air Force. Throttling back, Dusty's combat instincts kicked in. The lead pilot of the famous P-47 Thunderbolt, the spiritual forebear of his own Thunderbolt II, seemed to
Xanax? Possibly. Ammo in and of itself, the basic components of ammo have not really changed since the 1940s. Would it be, would it have as well refined of powder? Probably not. Would it work? I think it might work. It's just, it's, the quality of the gunpowder and primer would be less. So there is that. The gunpowder might not fire as clean, but the ammunition could work. But as Tanashi said, the biggest issue is fuel. Being able to find fuel for this. Like, you're not going to find much jet fuel that will work in an A-10. That would be properly refined jet fuel. In theory, if you had enough time, Falcon, but by the time they figured out how to reverse engineer it, the war would be over. No, I'm not entirely sure. I'm not entirely sure if it can take rocket pods as opposed to Hellfires. Grimwall, thank you for the follow.
to be inspecting his airframe. Keying their radio, Dusty picked up the right frequency and decided to play along.
Good morning, gentlemen.
He said with a thick Texas drawl, wagging his wings to make sure they knew he wasn't a threat. Then he took an absurd
Yeah. That sounds about right. Fucking Texan flying an A-10. Morning! I'm here to kick ass and chew bubblegum. And I'm all out of bubblegum.
punt, partially in jest.
I've been authorized by Eisenhower himself to accompany you on your mission today.
He said, half expecting a stern reply. Only they seemed to take the bait, saluting Dusty as they flew past, their eyes wide as saucers. They'd seen the famous shark's mouth painted on some of
Hi,
their
Ray.
own fighters, but never on anything like this. It had to be one of those secret jet programs they'd heard rumors about. They knew the Germans were developing them. They didn't know the Allies already had some of their own. Crossing the French coast, the P-47s broke off into pairs. The A-10 stayed on the wing of the flight leader, a grizzled veteran named Major Slick White. He explained their mission to Dusty. They were on their way to pound German armor in a bid to slow the Russia panzer columns before they could charge in to crush the growing Allied beachhead in Normandy.
You're there to take out tanks. Let me sing you the song of my people.
What the P-47 pilots didn't know was that the mysterious newcomer alongside them wasn't just strange, It was terrifyingly lethal. First, have you ever had a brilliant idea for a video but felt stuck because you didn't know where to start? Meet InVideo V3, the tool that'll help you communicate your ideas irrespective of what skill level you're at. Unlike traditional tools that can feel
Pug, I
overwhelming,
wish.
InVideo AI puts you
Like,
in the director's
this
seat,
is the
making
fun,
entire
this
video
is the
creation
fiber.
process
Oh, we have to go
seamless,
stop some
while it
armor.
does the heavy lifting. Just type in your idea,
You can
whether it's a
you can
recipe, a
feel
commercial, or
the
even a trailer
pilots
for a movie
smiling
that doesn't
behind the
exist,
mask when
and
they
watch
say
as
that. Like,
InVideo AI transforms
really?
it into a full-length video.
Armor, you'd
With
say,
text-based
huh?
commands, you can customize every detail. Want to add a voiceover or change the language? Just type it in. You can even clone your own voice for narration.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like the old
year was
German tanks.
1978. Ted Bundy had been terrorizing the nation for years.
And that's actually
InVideo AI
something
isn't
different,
just a
is
tool,
it could
it's your
probably
creative
use much
partner, and you
shorter
can try it right
bursts
now for free,
than
saving
normal
you hundreds of
for
dollars
and
on
achieve the
editing
same
and
goal.
stock footage.
Like
So
the
what are you
A10
waiting
could
for?
probably actually
Click the link in
conserve
the
ammo by
description
with
to
much
bring
shorter
your ideas
bursts.
to life with InVideo AI
Yeah?
V3. The A10 was perfect for the task, affectionately referred to as a warthog, the almost invincible tank buster specialized in tearing through armored columns and fortified positions. It was designed, well, 30 years into the future, at the height of the Cold War for this exact task, in order to shred Soviet T-74s pouring across the Fulda Gap. The A-10's engineers basically built out its world-famous airframe around its distinctly American ace in the hole, the Ju-8 Avenger. This 7-barrel 30mm Gatling cannon was capable of firing up to 70 rounds a second, or 4,200 rounds a minute. Though the plane itself only carried under 1,200 rounds, each was armor-piercing, depleted uranium. They were capable of punching through an entire tank column like butter, leaving nothing but twisted metal and fire in its wake. To put that into perspective, the A-10's gun is so powerful that when its pilot presses the trigger, the recoil alone unleashes 10,000 pounds of force, slightly more than the output of each of its two TF-34 turbofan engines. This effectively cuts the plane's airspeed in half, and there's only one way to counteract the recoil: throw the old girl into a shallow dive. So you're not only pitching up and down like you're on a wild roller coaster, you're riding the world's most powerful bull at the same time.
And,
Dusty wasn't there
Callum,
simply to
thank you for
make
the
mincemeat
follow.
with his cannon. His A-10 was loaded out with 16,000 pounds of American firepower, AGM-65 Maverick missiles, high-explosive bombs, and incendiary cluster munitions. This humble hog had the power to dismantle bunkers.
Whoa, no. What was that outfitting again? Hang on.
Pounds of American firepower, AGM-65 Maverick missiles, high-explosive bombs, and incendiary cluster munitions.
So he had Mavericks on there, large-sized bombs, and then cluster bombs. Fucking hell. Disrespect.
This humble hog had the power to dismantle bunkers, artillery positions, and large concentrations of enemy troops with surgical precision. The A-10 pilots are known for flying low and slow to identify targets. They routinely devastate ground forces by threading between buildings, weaving through valleys, and attacking from angles enemies don't expect.
Yeah,
in
they're
one
probably
legendary
smart
mission during the
bombs, too.
Gulf War,
Although, they're probably smart munitions. However, I'm racking my brain to think if the smart munitions require any kind of an uplink, which I don't think that they should. It should just require an uplink to the plane. I can't remember if the Maverick is laser guided or if it's or if it's radar. Yeah, so yeah, it would require a GPS uplink, which doesn't exist obviously. So, well, Alex, I mean, it's probably just my guess is they just decided to go with this loadout because I'm thinking it's probably what would be considered the most standard loadout for an A-10. Like, can they carry sidewinders? Sure, but this is likely, with the content creators when they look through what is the most standard loadout for an A-10, this probably was it. And Dragon, well, thank you for the follow. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Excuse me. Yeah, the Maverick wouldn't need the GPS. But however, if any of the bombs are smart bombs, you probably could just dumbfire them. I guess that is an option. You can dumbfire if something goes sideways with the GPS. It's not as fun, but you can do it.
An A-10 pilot destroyed over 20 Iraqi vehicles in a single day, obliterating supply lines and leaving enemy troops paralyzed.
Woof.
Combined with its heavy armor and redundancy systems that allow it to survive even with severe damage,
Well, that's
his
what I'm saying,
airframe was
Alex. It
truly
probably
a
just wasn't
flying
part of the
tank
standard
that
loadout,
refused to
maybe.
be taken down. But that was all still 50 years into the future. Dusty felt a tinge of nervousness in his throat. This was wartime France at the height of World War II, and he was about to enter the hornet's nest. It was now dawn, a bright sunrise revealing a luscious Norman countryside pockmarked by craters and debris. The invasion was on. The Thunderbolts were headed north to a series of villages north of Paris. British intelligence had pinpointed the bulk of Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt's Army Group B, the greatest threat to the landing forces themselves in this area. There were 9 panzer divisions and 1 panzer grenadier division in the whole theater.
Revan? It depends. If it's going on a dive bomb run, I don't think it will be too fast for it. But if it was just like, okay, so if the A-10 function was operating off of cruising altitude, the A-10's cruising altitude would have been higher than the British aircraft. Like, obviously the A-10 can cruise at a much higher elevation, but if it's maintaining at the same elevation, it probably wouldn't be good. I don't think it could. I don't think it would be too fast for anti-air, but it's more maneuverable, and it's obviously a lot tougher. Like the anti-air from World War II, the A-10 might ironically be able to, tank some of the A-10 strikes because it's so heavily armored. So, yeah, exactly. So, would it be too fast for the anti-air? Probably not, but it could actually take some of those hits that the other planes could not.
An armored reserve known as Panzer Group West had more than 1,400 tanks and self-propelled guns. Slick White, the lead P-47 pilot, explained that the Germans had kept their best armor inland, hidden for a mass counterattack. Allied spies operating in the underground French resistance had passed along accurate intelligence as to their exact whereabouts. Allegedly, the German panzers were staging for an upcoming inspection by Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox himself. If so, their ceremony was about to be turned into a good old-fashioned American turkey shoot. A minute out from the target, the Thunderbolts prepared for their initial strafing run. They would dive at a little over 400 miles per hour, maxing out the speed of their P-47s. Ironically, despite being 3 decades newer, the sheer bulk of the A-10 gave it a top speed comparable to the P-47s. This was because the cockpit, referred to as the bathtub, was protected by 1,200 pounds of pure titanium. It boasted double redundant hydraulic systems with manual reversion control in case the plane was hit. There was also a thick internal shield of multi-layer nylon spall and armored fuselage panels composed of titanium plates up to 1.5 inches thick. And not forgetting the 16,000 pounds of ordnance. Coming down out of a series of wispy clouds, Dusty could not believe his eyes. Ripples of morning sunlight casting long shadows over a wide open field where he saw what looked like an entire panzer division lined up in pristine order.
And that, chat, is what you call a very target-rich environment. I'm surprised that A-10 pilot didn't see that those neatly lined up columns of tanks and start drooling. Going, oh, it is gonna be good.
Rows upon rows of Panthers, Tigers, Panzer IIIs and IVs gleamed, freshly painted and meticulously maintained for review. The French underground had been right. Hundreds of Panzer Grenadiers milled about on the grounds, standing at attention. But the rumble of engines overhead shattered the morning calm. Dozens of American P-47 Thunderbolts and, at the helm, a single monstrous A-10 Thunderbolt II cut through the air, injecting fear and panic into the Nazi procession. Dusty watched as the P-47s dove first, roaring in low and fast. From their wings, 500-pound bombs whistled down into columns of armor, erupting in blinding fireballs and sending German soldiers scrambling for cover. Rockets tore through rows of panzers, their blasts flinging turret covers and treads skyward. Panzer Grenadiers scurried desperately for the tree line, .50 caliber bullets raked across the field, cutting down vehicles, supplies, and anyone unfortunate enough to be caught out in the open.
Wait, these things rolled 50 cals? You said it was P-37s, right? Did they roll off? They rolled with 50 cals? Really? Okay, I wasn't aware of that. Huh. Okay.
Amid the chaos, one P-47 took a direct hit from the flak batteries, now
He hit
firing as
top
fast
cabin.
as they could, and it spiraled down in flames. Dusty internalized the risk in his head. It did not deter him. No Luftwaffe fighters challenged the Americans. The skies were theirs. Now it was the A-10's turn. Dusty lined up his sights on the vast assembly of tanks stretched before him. It was the type of juicy target all A-10 pilots dreamed of. A literal dream scenario for an airframe expressly designed to this very end. Row upon row, all packed in like sardines in a can. Dusty's eyes lit up as he squeezed the trigger on the GAU-8 Avenger. The cannon roared to life, an anachronistic sound even by 1944 standards. A monstrous buzzing growl.
Night.
The recoil rocked the A-10 as the 30mm depleted uranium shells ripped through the Panzers like paper. Dusty came around 3 more times, using his AGM missiles and cluster munitions to eviscerate tanks. Tigers and Panthers were shredded as they exploded in spectacular fireballs. When the dust settled, columns of black smoke rose from the field, littered with the wreckage of what had once been one of Germany's prized panzer divisions. The Allies had claimed the field in a single devastating strike, leaving Rundstedt's armor in ruins. The day, in truth, was only just getting started. By the end of the day, Dusty and Slick's Thunderbolts would return to France 2 more times. The damage they inflicted had been so stark, unfolded so quickly, that they could not accurately verify the enemy's losses. Soon, word came through that they had rendered an entire panzer division combat ineffective. That morning surprise attack north of Paris delivered not only a crucial tactical victory, but a seismic psychological...
Wait, so is this little fantasy just basically gone the assumption that the Warthog can reload? Because you're saying what? They ran 2 other sorties and obliterated. So they're going on the assumption that the Warthog can just reload. Okay. I mean, it's fair. I mean, this is fantasy. It's fun. It's just basically saying, what if a Warthog fully capable of a full loadout could fuck shit up?
Shockwave that rippled up the German command chain.
Well, because he said, listen what he said here.
That's armor in ruins. The day, in truth, was only just getting started. By the end of the day, Dusty and Slick's Thunderbolts would return to France 2 more times. The damage they inflicted had been...
Yeah, so they did 2 additional sorties. Yeah, on the same day. Yeah, so... I mean, granted, in the first example, he lit him up with two missiles. Go on the assumption that it's carrying a rack of 4. So, okay, so you still have missiles left over. Depending on how controlled he was with his trigger squeeze, it would not... Well, and I'll tell you, there's the big thing, is the refuel. So, again, it is fantasy, so we're just this is just like a fun what if. I'm good with that. I'm good with a what if of just like, okay, fuck it. They can refuel it just because. This is a blatant what if, so I'm fine with that.
But a seismic psychological shockwave that rippled up the German command chain. Losing a key division set aside for Rommel's Fortress Europe defenses forced the German command to rethink their Normandy strategy. Hitler, who had placed immense faith in these heavy divisions to counter any landing force, was for once visibly shaken. Seeing his finest panzers obliterated from the air made him deeply wary of committing further armor into what was now clearly a death trap. Who knew the extent to which this new Allied Wunderwaffen could alter their fortunes on the battlefield? Begrudgingly, panzer reinforcements across France were delayed and dispersed. They were left idling far from the front lines at the precise moment when frontline forces needed every tank and gun they could spare. This unexpected advantage accelerated the Allied breakthrough in Normandy, shaving weeks off of what would have been a grueling and bloody battle through the Bocage. Allied forces advanced more swiftly into the French countryside, avoiding prolonged stalemates that had once seemed inevitable. The capture of Cherbourg, the closest major port, followed quickly, an invaluable supply line that would...
So it's almost like, I mean, yeah, Grumpy, you're right. Maintenance would be a huge problem. Like, maintenance, fuel, munitions. Like, yeah, absolutely, that would all be a major issue. But again, this is like fancy. I think this is more accounting for... I think this is what this is doing is that with a couple of runs, with a couple of sortie runs, the A10 could make a big enough impact that it would cause a decisive seismic shift in how the war would proceed. Where, because the mustachioed asshole would, not want to commit more armor because the A10's just going to come out of hell and blow it all back to it, and change up the tactics that wouldn't work, and thus allowing the allied nations to progress their war strategy even faster. So it's kind of more of, okay, the A10 doing this one little thing could have affected a gross change over the entire warscape in terms of planning and strategy. And so the A10 allowed the Allied forces to capitalize on the fear that the Germans were experiencing, and were able to accelerate their plan of attack and thus facilitate ending the war sooner. Effectively, Revan, yeah, it's kind of it was both a hard target op and a psyop. And how it worked so positively for the Allied forces' battle strategy.
Would have otherwise taken fierce fighting and cost thousands of Allied lives. With the Panzer threat effectively nullified, the Allies no longer needed Operation Cobra, an ambitious plan spearheaded by an immense aerial bombardment intended to punch a hole through the German lines. The Thunderbolt's single strike saved weeks of brutal close-quarters combat, preserved Allied momentum, and helped ensure the success of the entire Normandy campaign. What began as a daring airstrike had reshaped the course of the invasion. Dusty's A-10 joyride with the greatest generation, however, did not last long. Weeks after the Normandy invasion, Captain Ray Dusty Mason found himself once again in his A-10 over the skies of Germany. This time, the hunters became the hunted. Dusty's wingman spotted a menacing formation of prop-driven Focke-Wulf FW-190s and two jet-powered Me-262s zeroing in on their position. Dusty knew his Warthog made him the ugly duckling and the enemy's chief target. The German pilots had their prize in sight. The P-47 escorts found themselves outmaneuvered and outpaced, unable to shake the enemy's focus from the futuristic behemoth in their midst. Within moments, the air was filled with the thunder of cannon fire as the FW-190s and Me-262s closed in. Dusty could feel the relentless pounding as rounds tore through his fuselage, shredding control surfaces and splintering the metal skin. Shrapnel rattled around outside his cockpit, some of it embedding into the bathtub's plating surrounding him. Forced onto the deck, Dusty pushed the Warthog to skim the treetops, dragging the Germans through the valleys and towns. His desperate attempt at evasion carried on for almost an hour. With his plane taking even more damage, Dusty tried to pull up sharply, buying time for him to release his plane's countermeasures. The Luftwaffe pilots had never seen such advanced chafe, fiery objects drifting from the A-10's fuselage. One veered off, disoriented, while the other attempted to follow the Warthog's climb. Eventually, his faithful A-10, now riddled with holes, could hold out no longer. With grim resolve, Dusty made the call, climbing just high enough to bail out over occupied France. As he drifted down, he spotted a...
Honestly, I'm a little surprised that they wouldn't have taken the tact of, okay, we've got, the A-10 obviously is not an air-to-air fighter. It is not maneuverable enough to be an air-to-air fighter, but I'm honestly a little surprised that they didn't examine the possibility of the A-10 seeing inbound aircraft, literally pulling the stick and going vertical, and climbing to a degree that the other planes would not be able to get to due to lack of power to get that high up in the sky or oxygen or what have you. Because the A-10 has got to have a higher ceiling than World War II aircraft. And yeah, I mean, the fuel's the other consideration. The A-10's fuel tanks are a lot bigger. They like that's my first thought. It is the capabilities. True. I mean, true, Yard Dog. This is fantasy. It is fancy. We're speculating, like, we're actually digging into this on a technical standpoint, and this is supposed to just kind of be, like, speculative. But, yeah, I don't know.
A-10 getting shredded by Luftwaffe. Wait, what's this F-22 with the steel chair?
Yeah, Red
Sheer
Light, yeah.
100.
If this was an F-22, those frickin' Luftwaffe would have gotten fucking smoked in a heartbeat. They would have been smoked. But the A-10's not a fighter. The A-10's is a ground attack aircraft. It's not designed to do air-to-air combat. But it still would have had a higher... I still think it would have had a much higher ceiling than those. Yeah, 45,000 feet max altitude. The Luftwaffe aircraft would have had a ceiling probably about half that. So honestly, I think, like, you know, for in-transit flights, I would have thought that the A-10 would have been far better suited getting way higher where no aircraft could reach it. I mean...
Small farmhouse below. In 5 days' time, the French underground would find him. A few days later, one would guide him back to Allied lines. Weeks later, Dusty climbed into the cockpit of a P-47 Thunderbolt. Its simple, sturdy controls were a welcome contrast to the high-tech A-10 he had lost. As he took off, he glanced down at the fields below, where remnants of his Warthog's final journey remained scattered, a haunting reminder of the mission that had turned the tide of the war. As Slick and the other Jug pilots circled and formed up on his wing, Dusty imagined what a squadron of A-10s could have done against the Nazi war machine. Sure.
A squadron of A-10s. A full fucking squadron of A-10s. In World War II? Game over. Fucking game over. If they had a full-on squadron. Done. Game over. Complete. Yeah, the war would have lasted about as long as Desert fucking Storm.
It wasn't the fastest or the most fleet of foot,
37,000
even by
feet,
the
there you go.
standards of World War II. And sure, a fleet of Warthogs wouldn't have won the entire war on their own. With time to operate over a target-rich battlefield, their ground attack prowess and relentless firepower could have given the Allies a faster, less bloody path to victory. If the A-10 Warthog fought in World War II, which battle should it hit first? How much impact would it make? Share your thoughts below. Now go check out what if a single F-22 time traveled to Germany during World War II, or click on this video instead.
Hey, well, they have it. Okay. Chat. We're not gonna watch it now. We are not gonna watch it now. No. We have to save it. But we know a video we're gonna be checking out in the future to be sure.